24/7 synthwave with all your favorite artists.
What's up? This is Miami Nights 1984.
This is Celerec LA Dream.
This is FM 84.
Hey everyone, this is Arcade High.
I'm Alex, aka Highway Superstar.
This is Night Ride FM.
What's up, hackers? Welcome to, I don't have a title for this show, but this is the launch party for Responsible Red Teaming. Husky, are you there? Are you with us?
I'm here. I'm with you. I'm excited to be here. Hello, everybody, on this nice Monday night or day or whatever time it is for you. I see we've got Orbital Gun, Cyber Gabrin, MT Taggart. That's you.
That's me.
Neon Lights. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
It's great to see everybody. We're here celebrating the launch of two things, really. The first and most important for the moment, celebrating the man of the hour, HuskyHacks himself, and his new course, Responsible Red Teaming, subtitle, Operate with Honor. It is a free course on this little platform we like to call the Taggart Institute, which has a mission to provide low-cost, high-quality technology and cybersecurity training to everyone on the planet, and in low Earth orbit if the astronauts on the ISS are so inclined.
And I don't know what they have going on in their day-to-day. I'm sure they've got a lot to worry about in the first place, but on their downtime, if they want to learn about this stuff.
For sure. Honestly, I mean, we know that there are both Linux and Windows machines on the ISS, so probably important.
There are Windows machines on the ISS.
Oh, dude, there's like Windows 2000. Maybe not anymore. There were Windows 2000s machines on the ISS. I think they may have upgraded to Windows 7.
Who let that happen?
The U.S. government. Anyway,
of course.
Rather than bemoaning the state of our space infrastructure, we're here to talk about this amazing new course. And I know that some of you may have seen John Hammond actually hype this course this morning, which was a big surprise for me. But I'm so excited about this, for one, because ethics and morality is something that I think a lot about, not just inside of security, but just in general. And it's a touchstone that I want for the Institute going forward, but also something that I feel like is often very lacking in cybersecurity training. So, Husky, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about the kind of the inspiration for this course, what you wanted to do with it, and how it shaped up.
Yeah. So responsible red teaming is it's the put together painting. That's not even the right term for it. It's a mixing bowl of lots of different trinkets. All right, trinkets that I've collected over my time in red teaming, in my time as kind of an offensive cybersecurity practitioner. And so when I think back to the first time that I heard the term ethical hacker, right? That phrase, that term is used in this industry a lot. There's always been kind of a curiosity with that term, right? And I think a lot of people are kind of drawn to the field because of this kind of this mystical kind of thing about being an ethical hacker, right? You're doing the bad thing, but you're doing it for the good reason, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's almost implicitly a little bit of an interesting ethical, moral gray area in there in the first place, right? So that may have drawn me to the field originally, but eventually you get along, you mature in kind of your role and your career, your profession, your practice, and you start to realize that you look around and you realize that there's a lot of definitions of ethics and morality and what responsibility is all over the place. Everywhere you look, somebody's going to have kind of a different way that they define it, right? And I think responsible red teaming is just my attempt, and I disclaim this by saying I'm one person. I'm locked in my own set of experiences and into my own perspective. But it's my attempt to kind of codify what I would like to see in the space as responsible, ethical, and practical best practices. And so we run the gamut in the course talking about each of these different areas, and it starts very abstract. Like it starts like up in the, what does it mean to be a good human, right? But it gets very concrete very fast. And so I have some vignettes in there when I talk about, different examples, different little storytelling things of what could be ethical but not legal, or actually that's a bad example, but what could be legal but not ethical, what could be really good OPSEC and responsible and ethical. So there's this continuum that we exist in between these different concepts. And again, very abstract. We're talking about things like legality. We're talking about things like ethics and morals. And then we're talking about responsibility and OPSEC as it relates to being a red team operator. And so there's this continuum that we live inside of as RTOs and red team engineers and members of the red team that I don't think has ever really been talked about, really been defined. And you'll hear red team operators say things like, that's bad OPSEC. I wouldn't use that as OPSEC. Rarely do they ever talk about safety. Rarely do they ever talk about responsibility, but they also know about legality. They also might think about ethics sometimes. This is my attempt to kind of get that conversation going. It's my attempt to better define the things that we will consider to be ethical and responsible as it relates to the field. And it is also it's a course that's going to challenge you to think about your own ethical framework. And so, are you the type of person that believes that the ends always justify the means, no matter what those means are? In a red teaming sense, are you the type of red teamer that would be okay sending any kind of phishing email with any subject in it because you're saying, well, the adversary is not going to care about ethics, so neither should I? When you think about all of those kind of like very weird, theoretical, intangible aspects to the job, red teaming becomes so much more dynamic than just putting an exploit together, sending it to somebody, hoping they click on it, and then performing post-exploitation. There is such a dynamic field that we exist in when it comes to things like legality and morals and ethics. Responsible red teaming is my attempt to get that into the common parlance. It's my attempt to get that into the minds of the people that want to be red teamers, and it's part ego check too, where you're kind of saying, yes, a lot of people are drawn to the red team position because it's very intriguing. It's interesting work. It's interesting technical work where you get to play the bad guy. But it's we kind of require a bit of an ego check when we think about things like, well, you're still responsible for the outcomes of whatever you're going to do as a red teamer. And what are those outcomes going to look like when you don't consider how your red team activities are going to be received by the people that you're doing them to, right? Yeah. So already in this conversation, I've already gone on a tangent, but you can see how difficult of a conversation this is, right?
Yeah.
The red team training that's available on the market today is excellent. Let me, the courses that I've taken are excellent courses, but they're very much on the technical side. You think of things like CRTO, which is a fantastic course, and it does talk a little bit about, planning a red team engagement. But it's very much, all right, let's talk about Kerberoasting. Let's talk about building a payload. Let's talk about executing code in an environment. And it leaves... And this is not a knock on that course specifically. This is everywhere I look. All of the red team training that I've seen so far leaves it out of the conversation about let's check our intentions and go into this with our ethics in mind first, and then responsibility in mind second, and then start to think about our activities as a result of those things and not the other way around. So yes, that's a lot about it, but let's get into some of the more specifics because it gets. I think I've found that this subject, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about what these things mean to me, but I found this subject gets a little bit easier the more you get into the specifics of different scenarios.
So I have a few questions to ask.
Yeah, sure.
You can take a breath. So one of the things that when you were formulating this course that I was really interested in was this concept here as you were structuring it, distinguishing legality from ethicality, which I feel like we're familiar with generally as a concept. There are things that are moral to do or ethical to do that you might still get handcuffs put on for.
Right, yeah.
And vice versa, there's stuff that's totally legal that is still just grody. And you
questionable.
For sure.
Yeah.
But then we have these extra layers that you've put in this pyramid of responsible and OPSEC. And what I really want to focus in on is kind of the center of this pyramid center, because in my experience, and maybe yours is different, and if so, say so, but I feel like operators that I know are very good at calling out adherence to OPSEC and adherence to law, and the reason being that these are both sets of rules, and a lot of the folks who get into this industry are here because they're really good at learning rules of games and then learning how to exploit them.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so then tell me about how you see the importance of the center of this and where it's missing right now in both practice and in training material.
Sure. We could start with ethics, I think. And again, that's the more difficult one to start with, but I think we should start there because this is a pyramid. What you see on screen is a pyramid for a reason. I see the bottom layer as the legal aspect of being a red teamer, and that is your rules of engagement and your letter of authorization will allow you to perform things, to do things in a network that you would otherwise not be able to do. When the legality is sorted out, that is when red team operators, red team operator team leads, and the clients that they're working with need to think about the ethical aspects of their conduct, right? I give the example in the course that there is a very big difference between a red team operator that would be approaching a problem from an ethical standpoint where they're considering the end result of their activities as having an effect on humans in an organization versus a red team operator that is looking at the outcome of their activities and thinking, no matter what happens to get there, all I need to do is get there, right? Now, that's an extreme example, that, and we can get into kind of the ethical frameworks, the specific ethical frameworks that allow that. But this is one of the bigger things that I think is missing from the conversation. When we move up from legality, we step into the realm of ethics. And that means that until you can define your own ethical frameworks, until you talk with your team about the things during an engagement that the things that you will find permissible and the things and the boundaries that you will not cross, and lastly and most importantly, until you talk to your clients about those boundaries, you cannot go further than that rung of the pyramid. And so I kind of earlier in that section, I think right at the top, I started off with a very small vignette and say, you're a red team operator. Would you ever consider sending somebody a fish that's just saying, "Hey, upload a funny photo of a pet or an animal or something, and click on this link to do it"? Right? I think a lot of, and I say this in the text, a lot of reasonable red teamers would say, "No, that's no problem. That doesn't hurt anybody. That's not going. That's completely acceptable because there's no damage being done to on the receiving end of that." The flip side, the logical extreme on the other example would be to use the death of somebody's spouse as a phishing pretext, because maybe you did some OSINT and you found out that they had just lost a loved one. And so legally, if all you care about is the letter of authorization and your rules of engagement, and with a caveat saying that there's nothing off limits, in a legal sense, you would be okay to send that fish. In an ethical sense, I think most reasonable people would say that is abhorrent and no one would ever do that. And any red teamer that would be okay with sending that is somebody I don't want on my team. So the difference is ethics.
This is where I want to dive in, because what's so interesting about what I think you put together here is that, first of all, you take an actual ethical stance. You're not just saying, well, you have to decide for yourself. No, you make some judgment calls here, which good news, I agree with. But there is an ethical argument to be made for that being an okay thing. And this is kind of the important thing. I think a lot about this from my experience as a martial arts student and instructor and self-defense instructor, right? And there are a lot of folks in that world who are like, well, you got to train as realistically as possible, which means, like, if you're doing knife defense, then at some point you're going to be using an actual sharp-edged weapon. That is a super bad idea, right? Because even if it's realistic, everybody gets hurt. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And why is it a bad idea? There's a quantifiable reason why it's a bad idea in the martial arts context, and there is a quantifiable reason why that's a bad idea in the red teaming context, because you may end up doing more damage than you're trying to prevent, right? But it's also about huge. And
it's also about your conception of the good, if we were going to put it in some Rawlsian terms, where if your conception of the good is based around, like, quote unquote justice or some other value that's like well, we need to protect the organization, we need to get them ready for everything, and that's why we're going to be hardcore about this fish. You are making a judgment that, so in that framework, that kind of really, really awful fishing lore pretext is totally understandable and justifiable. But here's the thing. In this course, you go through kind of 3 different frameworks for ethical decision making. One of them is consequentialism, right? Or utilitarianism. And this is where, if you've watched The Good Place, right, Chidi does a great job going through this.
The greatest good for the greatest number of people. Strict utilitarianism.
Exactly.
Is the outcome of my action going to bring about the good to the largest number of people? That is the kind of mantra, the summarization of consequentialism. Yep.
Right. Then of course we have deontology, going all the way back to the beginning of ethics, and of course
This is when ethics got very strange, when they started saying, we want to know what's good, so we're going to attempt to define absolute good and absolute evil, or absolute right, absolute wrong as set in stone as possible, right? And there are applications. You can kind of translate that into more of a modern approach, but the old school deontologists it's very interesting, very strange writing, honestly.
Well, I'll give you a fun just language game, Wittgenstein, that you can play, where if most of the time when people are talking about this subject using the term morality as opposed to ethicality, 9 times out of 10 they're talking about deontology, because they are ascribing to and again, sorry, I'm in Kant mode, an a priori good and evil that is beyond human judgment. It just like is the way it is in the universe, and that is just what they ascribe to, right? So that's a way of framing the universe, but it's something to be super careful about, because there's no arguing with it, and two, those values end up being outside of human ken. So it ends up being about what is right based on this system of laws that has come down from a higher power, as opposed. And by the way, I'm not dinging that necessarily. I'm just saying this is like the framework, as opposed to what the impact on humans is going to be from your decision.
Yep.
Now, sorry, one last piece, and then I will shut up. Sorry, I never get to do this.
That's good. I think like this is kind of, while we're in this like weird soupy ethics area, I mean, this is the kind of conversation that we can have. Because like, what are red teamers concerned with? They're like, I want to make sure my payloads work. I want to make sure that my exploits work. I want to make sure that I have a clear path to target. But when you peel it back a little bit, you get to talk about these things, because I would wager a lot of red teamers act ethically according to their own set of ethics, but don't understand a lot of the different options in ethical frameworks that are out there. Maybe options is a bad word. Kind of the different paradigms of ethical frameworks, right?
Yeah.
But please continue.
Okay.
This is why I made the course, man.
So it might seem like we're a long ways away from Sigmund Freud in the 19th century, and going into the 20th. But it turns out, especially in psychology, not so much. And there's a lot of Freudian thinking that still makes its way not only through psychological study, but also into other disciplines. If any of you who are English majors out there had to go through lit theory, you know that one of the things you have to learn is Freudian interpretation. And so one of the reasons I bring up Freud is that Freud did studies on ethical decision-making. But what he did was he studied the decision-making of boys, right? Young boys. And he also wrote about the decision-making of girls and women, but he decided that it was too hard. He decided that the ethical decision-making of women was either suspect or too complex for anyone to ever understand, and just punted on it. And that was, until the 1970s, the letter of psychological study in ethical decision-making.
Yep.
Enter Carol Gilligan, who wrote in a different voice, who decided that this was a dumb idea, and went back and started to research how girls versus boys, and again, I know that I'm speaking in gender binaries, I understand it's a spectrum, but this is the way that the research was framed, started to talk to girls about their ethical decision-making. And what she found was that girls' conception of the self was different generally than boys' conception of the self and their conception of ethics. When boys made ethical decisions, they were deriving them from a set of universal laws that they considered adherence to be just. Meaning,
and what is that? What ethical framework did we just cover that happens to be right that?
Exactly.
Deontology.
Now, sometimes there was some consequentialism in there, but it was always like a really cold, sterile like calculus, right? Like, oh, well, this will do this much good for everybody.
Yep.
The way that girls generally in these studies, and there are a lot of interviews and tapes about this, the way that girls usually did it was not about that, but considering what an action or a choice was going to do to the people involved in the scenario. What impact it was going to have for the people who were related, what it would mean for them on a very personal level. And it was that kind of decision-making that Freud just couldn't make heads or tails of. But in fact, is a totally legitimate way of making ethical decisions, because it's about your relationships to other people. Or to put it in contractualism terms, from Peter Scanlon, what we owe each other. And so...
And thus the ethics of care. So
exactly.
This is out of the 70s. Carol Gilligan, Joan Tronto. And this is an ethical framework where you decide right and wrong based on what you owe your fellow humans, right? What you owe to the people. And in the red teamer context, what you owe to your clients, what you owe to your team, what you owe to your team lead. And it can be wrapped up in kind of the phrase that we're humans and we coexist and we need to be good to each other and care about each other, right? And so it's there are, when you compare it to kind of the earlier ethical frameworks that we've already talked about, I mean, the other ones seem so staunch and sterile compared to the ethics of care, right? And that's thousands of years of recorded history talking about ethics. And just in the 70s, we get around to saying, could we derive an ethical system that treats people or focuses on how you treat people and your relationships to them, right?
And Toronto wasn't even until the 90s.
Toronto
was 93.
So yeah, four major things under that Joan Toronto wrote about under the ethics of care that you owe to people, right? Attentiveness, responsibility, competency, and responsiveness, right? So when you are making decisions, you factor these four things in to how you conduct yourself in relation to your fellow humans, right? And we can map these really, really cleanly onto how you conduct yourself as a red team engineer, right? Attentiveness. Are you paying attention to how your activities are not just carried out, but how they might be perceived? How they might affect the people on the other end. Actually, Praxis had a question earlier. Husky, in the vignettes, do you call out emotional, mental safety as well as physical? So that indirectly, yes, the vignettes are like storytelling. So they do include a period of a story where the red teamer performs an activity that is emotionally destructive to somebody on the other end and is relieved from the team, right?
Yeah.
So attentiveness. Are you paying attention? Okay, yes. Crafting any kind of fish with any kind of context might get you a click, but are you paying attention to how that's going to affect the person on the other side?
And even more broadly, are you paying attention to what your client actually needs?
Yeah,
right.
There you go. That is a very good thing that people tend to miss a lot. Is that are you rolling up with the absolute cutting edge of tradecraft and exploits and a take no prisoners attitude when your client is only asking to baseline their security program? Mm-hmm. Are you trying to like bring a bazooka to a knife fight in a sense, right? They're like, is there any need to break out that kind of thing? So are you paying attention to that, and how does that affect your decision making? Responsibility, we can kind of put a pin in responsibility because we're about to talk about the next level up from that. But competency and responsiveness, are you good at your job when you're performing it in the red team context? Are you sufficiently good at it so that you can make decisions that will control the amount of impact that you have in an environment to tailor it to the needs of the clients and not prevent any additional destruction from taking place, right? And responsiveness. When you perform these activities, are you are paying attention to your clients and how they're receiving them? There's a whole section on report. It's not necessarily report writing. It's the art of presenting report findings without making enemies that I talk about later in this course, right? Yeah. And so responsiveness fits very well into that. So yeah, if it's the job of the instructor to present information for you. And say, these are your options, these are your frameworks. But yes, there is kind of an unspoken through line here, and that the Institute agrees with, and that I agree with when I was thinking about and searching my own kind of ethical quandary here and my own ethical questions, that the ethics of care fits extremely well into how I like to live my life. The ethics of care fits extremely well into how the Institute, I think, wants the state of the field to be carried out. And the ethics of care, I think, maps very well to how red teamers could be carrying out their jobs.
Absolutely.
And so that's why it's kind of highlighted here in the ethical section.
Yep. To pause for a moment. So Tiberius has rated us. Thank you so much, Tibbs. Hope your stream went well.
Hey, Tibbs.
Just some stuff from the chat. We see there's often overlooked ethics of care in religious writing, especially Sikhism, Buddhism, and monastic practices, various religions. Certainly Jainism would fall into that as well. Absolutely, that is true.
Yes.
One of the things that, when we talk about ethics, morality, and like philosophy, one of the pitfalls we often fall into is focusing not just on male philosophers, but also on Western philosophers. And it is absolutely the case that a lot of this consideration is much more present in the ascetic writing of other cultures.
Yes, and so I will add that I'm aware of that, and like I said kind of earlier on, I'm locked to my own perspective. I'm locked to my own experiences. I don't feel even remotely qualified to speak on the depth and complexity of things like Buddhism, Sikhism. Those just aren't in my vocabulary. Those aren't really in my vernacular. If anybody has like good resources on that, or if anybody, because I really did try to write in the earlier stages of writing this course. I tried to open the perspective to a kind of more worldly assessment of different ethical frameworks, and I was way in over my, like, I was taught, like, this section would have been an entire course if I had tried to do that. So yeah, let's talk Prax, because I tried to, and I was way in over my head. And so I omitted it because I wanted to do it justice, and I don't think I could. So let's talk Prax. Yeah. I would love to learn more about that. And if there's an addendum I can write to this course for the ethical section, then I would love to work that into the next update.
Absolutely. I bet you're going to get some resources. And one of the things that I do want to call out as we sort of pivot to the next part of this is Husky and I spend a lot of time talking about how right now the offerings from the Institute are from an entirely white male perspective. Yeah. That's something that we want to change sooner rather than later. That's where we're starting, but we recognize that it is a shortcoming, and we need to do a little bit better about it. So we want to do all the work that we're supposed to do to make that happen, but any help that folks are willing to provide will be much, much appreciated. So
absolutely.
Okay, so it turns out that this isn't just a seminar on ethics, although that would have been perfect for me. It turns out that this course has technical components, and we're going we should absolutely talk about the next level up in the pyramid here, because all right, let's say you made it through the ethics section, you're like, all right, Husky, like, this is cool and all, but it's a little theoretical. When do I get to actually put my hands on the keyboard? And responsibility is that time, right? Mm-hmm. If you look back at the pyramid, responsibility and OPSEC are the two higher rungs of the pyramid. Responsibility as a red teamer dictates our day-to-day activities, right? So more than legality, more than ethics, responsibility is the thing that when we are operating in the day-to-day, we need to look at our decision-making, our exploits, our the things that we're trying to do in the target network, and consider them not just from this role, this mask that we're wearing, the role that we're playing, right? Because when you are a red team operator, you put on a mask. You play the role of the adversary based on what your client needs, right? They say, we have a brand new security program. We need to baseline our security against low sophisticated threats. Can you please go into our network and act like you're a low sophistication? So you're playing that role, but you're still a good guy. Yeah.
Like, you're still on the side of the defenders. And when you're done with the technical portion of the engagement, that role comes off. That mask is dropped. And so you're doing activities that still require levels of responsibility all throughout the engagement, even though you are injecting strategic amounts of risk into the environment by playing an adversary, right?
Right.
So responsibility is the thing that's going to ask questions like, what do your C2 comms look like on the wire? Very practical, very technical things that can be attributed to responsibility. Are you handling your client's data, including their credentials and any data that you siphon off of their environment as an objective? Are you handling that with care? Are you going to be okay talking in front of all of your peers and people in the industry? Would you be okay? And this is like a Marine Corps thing that was taught to me early on. Would you be okay standing up in front of a group of your peers and superiors and other members of your industry and explaining in painstaking detail why you did what you did and why you thought it was okay, right? And so that is responsibility. It is the
what's the Marine Corps definition of integrity?
It's doing the right thing at all times, regardless of if anybody is watching. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I even didn't need to think about that because it's been drilled into me in boot camp. So the only thing missing is that I'm not holding out my rifle by its Meryl saying it. So that's responsibility. Responsibility is going to be the more technical. OPSEC is absolutely the most technical of all four of these, right? So yeah, when we talk about responsibility, we are forgetting about the fact that we're an emulated criminal right now. What we need to do is think about from the vendor's perspective, from the stakeholders' perspective, from the client's perspective, are you being careful with what you're doing? The example, the vignette that I give is, let's say I'm an internal red team or I'm doing an assumed breach compromise situation and I have found a file share and it's just chock full of data. I'm talking like gigs of data that, it was very, very easy to enumerate.
Yikes.
But gigs of data, and I'm thinking this is gold. This is my objective. I'm going to be able to put this in the report. This is excellent. But there's one problem, and that in my haste, I forgot to set up like a file extraction point, right? I forgot to set up a server somewhere that I could blast these files off to show the impact, right? So I'm looking around, I'm panicking, and I'm saying, okay, I'll just use a random file upload site, like one of those that you find on just kind of open out on the internet, right? Mega.nz, let's use that. And so, unbeknownst to me, when I extract all of those files, there was a canary token in there, and one of the canary tokens triggered, and the IP address says that it's triggering in New Zealand. And so the control cell agent, the trusted agent on the blue team, calls me up and says, "Why are you doing anything from New Zealand right now? We said that we only wanted United States IP space to be involved in this." So, yes, what you did was legal, because you have the authorization to do it in this story. What you did was ethical. There's nothing ethically unsound about using a file server to store your files when you're exfiltrating them, but you weren't responsible. And so this is like a critical part of the course, is to understand that there are some things that you can check the box on legality and check the box on ethicality, but you can't check the box on responsible. Catching a callback, a reverse shell with an open netcat port in an unencrypted fashion across the internet could be legal and ethical depending on your circumstances, but could never, ever be considered responsible if you care about your clients and their data, right?
You want to talk about the CYOA at this point, now that you're kind of talking about how it goes?
Well, yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
I was kind of hoping to save that for kind of
No, we can do that.
end
We can
here.
We can do that.
Because I think that would be a good thing to end up on. But what we can talk about is one of the other labs, not the lab that we'll be doing tonight, but one of the other labs is the C2 design gauntlet, right? And so that's a little bit south from where you are. It's down in the there you go.
There
red
it is.
Team,
The C2
responsible
design
red team
gauntlet.
infrastructure design.
Yes.
I put you into the position where you need to set up different types of C2 infrastructures and decide and apply scientific rigor to the design of these infrastructures and decide and make the decision on if these are safe enough and responsible enough to operate with. And we start with the worst possible C2 setup, which I just described, is no C2 setup, is netcat over the open internet, right? And it's like you're applying different different like tests to this, right? If you open up a netcat port to the open internet, it takes about 4 minutes for a scanner to pick you up, right? If you're catching a netcat listener with no encryption on the wire, anybody who is standing between you, the routers that are standing between you and your target can see what you're exfiltrating, right? Yeah. So we start with just the worst possible nightmare scenario, and we work gradually on solving each of those problems until we get up to a modern, what I consider to be best in class C2 that was designed from the ground up to be safe. And I don't know if anybody wants spoilers on what that is or not, but I'll just leave that for discovery.
Yeah, we won't go through all of it.
Do that. Yep. So that this is where responsibility comes in play. It's a lot more practical, I think, than a lot of people would think, right?
Yeah.
Because it concerns things like, okay, who cares if you're emulating, Fin7 or App28 or any Lazarus group? Who cares who you're emulating? When you take off that role, is what you're doing safe for the data that is at risk in the environment, right? And so there are other things that we get into in responsibility as well, but all of the practical portion of this course is built around that idea that responsibility with ingenuity and hard work can be imbued into each of the practices, the day-to-day payload keying that we talk about for one of the labs. There's a challenge to build malware that's responsible, right? Build something that's going to cause a certain amount of controlled damage, but do so in a way that mitigates and minimizes all of the other risks. That is what we're talking about when we talk about responsibility.
So I am looking at this list, and one of the things that I was thinking about is what a good resource, just especially this lab is for folks who either have primarily used Cobalt Strike in their professional Red Team career and want to explore alternative frameworks, or if you're just getting started in offensive security, or you have your OSCP or you have your PNPT and you're kind of moving to the next level. And this really is kind of where that is. This is a great way to learn a whole bunch of new tools that you maybe haven't explored, with some guidance about how to do it well. So I do want to ask, what level of experience would you say is appropriate to get the most out of this course?
Yes, so you hit the nail on the head. People coming out of CTFs and OSCP, and CRTO, and maybe some of the other training offerings, coming out of those training offerings, that is probably the level that you want to be at when you want to take this course. Now, I believe that you could benefit from this course even if you're not at that level, right? I think there is no problem in teaching people responsibility from their earliest stages, but a lot of this stuff assumes familiarity with how red team operations are carried out. In the lab that you're looking at right now on screen, I mean, there is a whole bunch of assumptions here when you're talking about things like C2 infrastructure and how we're bouncing in this lab. We bounce a C2 callback from our red team Kali box out to the open internet across a redirector or across or to a cloud instance that you stand up, and then back to wherever you're trying to catch that shell, right? So yeah, there's some assumed competencies that you should have coming into this, right? So yeah, I mark this. I've been writing training. I've been writing content for a few years now. It's always very hard to kind of nail down the actual difficulty because it's subjective. It's different for everybody. But like intermediate and intermediate plus, verging on advanced at a couple points. But all of the labs that I consider to have the advanced content in them are written so that they can be completed with the instructions. Some of the other labs, I write this in the course expectations, are a little more free form. They assume more of the student so that the student can get more out of the kind of free workspace, right? That's there with them. We're talking about things like building malware that has keying mechanisms in them, right? So that kind of thing it's very much up to you what kind of malware you want to write in that. It has to do some kind of malicious thing, but we're also discussing how keying techniques are going to mitigate external or extra risk, right? So yeah, there are some, I would say like intermediate plus. I do say you probably want a little bit of familiarity with writing software. You do not at all have to be like a software engineer, but if you're going to be a red teamer, it's a very good practice to get into learning how to develop payloads and write custom payloads, right?
I mean,
so this kind of goes hand in hand with that.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to beat around the bush. Like, look, this is not sold or it's not offered for free as a beginner course. And
no, it's not a beginner course. I mean, if you're like, I would like to get into ethical hacking, where do I start? This is a little bit further than I think where you want to go. But hey, even if that's the case, read the stuff on responsibility, read the stuff on ethics. It's going to help you. Yeah. The labs might just be a little bit higher.
There's a good question from Prax here.
Yeah.
When developing malware for an engagement, do you consider how the malware could be abused by a third party?
Yes, and I mean that's the purpose of two of the labs in this course. One of them is the malware keying lab, right? Let's say you build a payload and you drop it into an environment that is not, or you don't drop it there, but let's say it ends up in an environment that's not your intended target. Malware keying prevents your malware from running somewhere that's out of scope. So that's like the first answer to that. And the second answer to that is the Yara writing lab. I think that's a little bit north of where you are up there. Yara rules for custom red team tools. So this lab talks about when you develop custom in-house red team tools, which I've done a lot. what you want to stow along with your code is a Yara signature or a Sigma signature that can be released to the public in the event that your tool goes a walking out the door. And we talk about
That's never
the
happened.
idea of yeah, that's never happened. Oh, has it though? I think the Mandiant red team would like to say otherwise, or the FireEye red team at the time. So we talk about this thing called a break glass protocol or a break glass scenario, and that means like break in case of emergency. So that is what happens when you find evidence of compromise in your environment, right? When you're operating in the red team space, you're usually trusted enough to have your own infrastructure that's out away from the company, though I do talk about why it's beneficial to have on-premise infrastructure as well. But if, the long story short is that the red team infrastructure is not going to be audited by the blue team. The red team infrastructure needs to be audited by the red team, right? And if you are paying attention and you see connectivity that's happening that shouldn't be, or you have canary tokens all over your infrastructure and one triggers, and you realize that there's a good time, there's a good chance rather, that your infrastructure has been compromised, what do you do? This happens way more often than I think people are willing to admit or would ever admit to, but it does happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what we talk about when we talk about the safety of your tools falling into the wrong hands. This is kind of an element of responsibility that we can iron out, right? If the day comes when your red team infrastructure is compromised and you now have to consider every single tool that you've ever written to be burned and out in the hands of threat actors, you can release a huge repository of Yara rules that will help defenders around the world identify when your tools are used against them. And I understand that, okay, why don't they just change that? Yeah, I understand that. I totally get that. It's not perfect, but this is responsibility. This is due diligence, right? Threat actors can change the signatures of your malware if they have the source code. Yes, we know that to be true. But that's no excuse for you not to try, right? And so that's break glass protocol. We get into that as well.
Right.
Do we store Yara rules in the same infrastructure? Yes, I go over this. The example we use in the lab is if I'm authorized under, I say I'm a red team engineer for the Taggart Institute, and in my rules of engagement and my kind of governing documents, I'm authorized to use GitHub as a in private mode, like using private repositories. If I'm authorized to do that, I keep the Yara rules either along with the tools in the main directory of each of the GitHub repositories, or I make a big separate repository of all of the Yara rules and date them and commit them that way, or put them in by MITRE ATT&CK technique identifier, or put them in by tool name, right? So either one of those two is a good approach to that. But if you're not authorized to work on GitHub, if you have an internal GitLab to your red team infrastructure, which I have seen before, same thing applies. You can keep your Yara rules stowed in your GitLab repository as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe just to round it out, because we're at the top of the pyramid now, OPSEC is the final rung of the pyramid here, and I think I'm probably going to catch flack for this. But I think OPSEC is the last thing you should be considering as a red teamer, honestly, when it comes down to it, because I define OPSEC as from the attacker, from the emulated adversary's perspective, how sophisticated do I need to be? So when you hear red teamers talk about things like, oh, I think Empire is a great framework, but I worry about the OPSEC of it, or what's the most OPSEC-friendly way to Kerberos, what they're saying is, how do I do this without getting caught?
Yeah.
Right. And that is the last thing as a red team operator who is operating responsibly, ethically, and under the guise of legality, or under the permission of legality. That is the last thing that you should be worried about, because OPSEC is different when you're doing different threat emulation, but responsibility, ethics, and legality are never ever negotiable.
Are there situations? Sorry, go ahead.
OPSEC is always based on the type of threat that you're emulating.
Are there situations in which responsibility obliges you to employ more operational security than the threat you're emulating would do?
I would say yes. your run-of-the-mill cyber criminal is not go, and that's why responsibility is a lower rung in the pyramid, right? Your run-of-the-mill cyber criminal is probably not going to care about encrypting their communications, or maybe they do, but they have the choice, right? Your run-of-the-mill cyber criminal is not going to care about keying their payloads, or maybe they do. They might have the choice, but we don't, right?
It's 2022. I still see HTTP C2 callbacks.
I do too. I do all the time. That's kind of a very important part of the of this whole equation here, is that OPSEC is based on the threat that you're emulating, right? But when you're not a criminal, when you're a red teamer, doing your job in a responsible way, you never get to negotiate for that. You always get to negotiate with your client about what type of threat you want to play the role of. And that does include, because I know there's some people out there saying, well, that's threat emulation. That's not red teaming. Red teaming is about using any kind of tool, technique, or procedure to achieve the objective and then showing the result. I understand that. If that's what your client needs, then go forth and do that. Consider your OPSEC to be the more sophisticated permutation of that. But for some clients, they're only going to need low sophisticated threats to baseline a program or test a tool. They're not going to need and you do probably more, and this is a separate conversation, you do more harm steamrolling the blue team than I think you realize when you do that. But that's completely beside the point. The point is that your client and you can have the conversation to decide on the level of sophistication needed that will allow you to either use really, really good OPSEC or not use good OPSEC. But you're never ever going to be in a position where you're like, oh, we obviate the need to act responsibly and ethically and legally because the adversary is not going to, so why should we?
Yeah,
that is the type of thinking that gets people in trouble.
As a defender, I'll go so far as to say that if you're, and this is, by the way, this is an obligation on both the defender side and the red teamer side. If the engagement is not framed around a viable threat model that the organization is concerned about, nobody's getting value out of the engagement, really.
That is earlier in the scoping conversations, that is critical, right? And that, it's a mark of responsibility to make sure that your client understands, hey, we want to emulate threats that are relevant to you, right? Mm-hmm. To avoid that situation entirely. When you, and again, this goes into the reporting and reporting without making enemies kind of section. When you roll up and steamroll the blue team, and then you talk about all of these ridiculously awesome technical things that you were able to carry out, and how you trounced them, and you're demoralizing them.
Yeah,
you're doing more damage than you probably understand, right? But again, this is up to the client. If the client, and let me caveat, I've never seen this in my whole life, but if the client says, I want you to steamroll the team, I want them to be hit with everything that you've got, there is no TTP, there's no exploit activity that's not on the table for this. And again, assuming everything we've talked about well, don't fish them with things that are, emotionally damaging or whatever. But as far as technical tactics, techniques, and procedures go, hit them with everything you've got. Then yeah, if that were to be the case, if that's your scope of engagement, go forth and be relentless. But I've never seen that, and I think it would be a rare circumstance that would be useful. So yeah, that's OPSEC. That's the OPSEC is an attribute of the threat that you're emulating. It is not the it's not the be all end all, I think is what I'm trying to get across. That's why I think I'm going to catch flack for it, because I think a lot of the diehard red teamers are going to come after me for that. That's okay. I'm fine with that.
We'll just post the "Why are you booing? I'm right" gif, because that's absolutely the correct position. You want to do a lap?
Yeah, let's do the lab, man.
Okay,
let's talk it. So, I don't know how. So we've got, this is actually really good because we got till 10. So there are the lab that we wanted to do tonight is there are two parts to this, and I don't know how far we'll make it through. I want to make it through to the Sysmon side.
I think we can.
Okay, so the setup for this is I tell a little story about how it was my first red team operator assignment, and I was very excited, and I'm thinking I'm getting there, and I'm thinking I'm right out of CRTO and earlier, maybe a year before that, OSCP, and I'm thinking like, what kind of cool exploitation am I gonna get to do, right? And the first thing that I did after setting up my laptop and everything, I was charged with maintain, because and a little bit of background here. My red team lead was like, so you used to do cyber ranges? And I'm like, yeah, I played op4 for the cyber ranges, but I also did a lot of building ranges and setting up elk and setting up, monitoring systems. And he's like, oh, that's good, because we have a red elk server, but it's kind of out of in a state of disrepair right now. So could you fix that up? And I'm like, wait, what? And I'm like, it dawned on me, and like I was very naive at the time. It dawned on me. I'm like, red teamers do logging? And I'm like, it should not have surprised me, but it did, right? And so this is one of the labs that I wanted to introduce, is that when you want to take on the role of a red teamer, hey, everybody loves to do the exploitation stuff. Everybody loves to do the cool hacker man stuff. But then there are things to consider, like the logging and the auditing of your environment and setting up the technical infrastructure to be able to do that, right? And so when you're sitting at a Kali terminal and you're performing things on target, is there a way that we can get the input and output of your terminal into a record so that you can say, no, I didn't do that, and I have the Kali terminal output to prove it, right? Well, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to use a little... it's a bash script that actually still works in Zish, a smart logging script. We're going to set up Elastic, so the Elasticsearch, Kibana, and we use Fleet in this case to collect logs and bring them into Kibana, which is a data visualizer, so that we can search and see exactly what we did at any given point. The second part of this lab is where things really pick up. The second part of this lab is when we install Sysmon for Linux for crazy good Linux auditing and logging, right? And so when we install Sysmon for Linux on our red team operator workstations, what we're doing is putting up a shield. We're not necessarily a shield, but we're putting up we've got really good observability into the defense of our red team infrastructure. And this goes hand in hand with, how do you know if your environment's been compromised? Prax, have a great night. Please hit me up later, and I'd love to talk more about everything we were talking about earlier. So have a good night, guy. So yeah, let's get going. We do need, I have the RRT Kali VM there, but any Kali basically will do for this. I just provide the RRT Kali for kind of consistency's purposes.
Well, it just so happens that I'm on a Kali box right now. That's what we're looking at this from.
Through the magic of TV, we have one prepared. Look at that.
Now, what I don't have, and because I wanted to go through this whole thing, was... I don't have Docker installed, right? Mm-hmm. And you just reminded me that I should use Zish for this rather than my beloved fish. So I will suffer through it.
Yeah, so the first thing that we do is a very simple thing, but it's just something that, again, like, these are simple things, but they all add up a little bit, right? The first thing that we're going to do is just add a timestamp to the Kali prompt, right?
Okay.
And that assists in observability. Again, it's a very simple thing to do, and I'm kind of surprised Kali doesn't do it already. But you'll have a timestamp that you can reference. In the documentation section of this course, I talk about note-taking, how important note-taking is. And note-taking will... make or break you, really, as far as your career as a red team operator. You're going to be taking a lot of notes, right? So the things that help note-taking are things like timestamping your, something just simple like that, timestamping your Kali prompt so that you know when you ran a command or when you hit enter.
Okay, so I have my ZS RC up. It has
we'll go ahead and
a bunch of stuff in it that I didn't know was there.
I guess so.
That's because Kali's ZSHRC has stuff in it. I've never looked at it before because I always use fish.
Yep. So let's go ahead and save into this one. Should be good to just throw it right at the end for the prompt there. Yep.
Okay. Fantastic.
And we just need to like source ZSH or exit out of your terminal and go back in. But yeah, this should be pretty much the easiest step of the lab there. There you go. Look at that.
Nicely done.
Okay. Again, congratulations. Part one of the lab's done. But again, simple, yes, but this will help you in your note taking. This will help you prove when you did things, right? In your screenshots, like this is going to help you like correlate time. And so one of the things that I talk about is called deconfliction. And so deconfliction is when the red team is performing activities on against the blue team. Well, the blue team is still handling real threats, right?
Yeah.
And so there's going to be somebody on the inside, usually they call the trusted agent. And the trusted agent's job is to deconflict and say, okay, they have two headsets on. One's the red team, one's the blue team. And they're saying, okay, red team did this. Okay, blue team, do you see this? Okay, was that the red team? Red team, was that you? Yes, that was them. Okay, blue team, that was the red team. That's the process of deconfliction. It's somebody to be able to say, oh yeah, I know that the red team was doing that. You're okay. You can mark that as red team activity and say that it was detected.
Yep.
That's the process of deconfliction. During that process, you're going to need timestamps. You're going to need accurate timestamps on when you did things. And with this, you're going to be able to do that. So just a nice, easy thing. And I know that you've got the fish terminal as well that has that already, but the Kali terminal does not have that by default.
That is right. I was just showing that. Yeah. So if you
yeah.
set up your shell, like the way that we do in PWST, right? If you set up fish with Oh My Fish and Bob the Fish, you also get this really nice timestamp for every command that you execute. But I have to say, for visibility's sake, I actually love the way that you've done this here.
Yeah, it's just nice right there, and yeah. So, anyway, so that's timestamps. Very easy. Let's move on.
Okay,
this is where things start to pick up. So, we're gonna through some code that I've kept over the years. From different assignments, we're going to make a smart script logging utility, right?
Whoa! And
so this is, it's pretty intense. So you can copy this whole thing into the bottom of your zishrc file, right?
Yep.
And yeah, just not obviously omitting the snip part.
Mm-hmm.
But so what's going to happen is this is going to give you a couple of utilities. You can scroll all the way to the bottom and just slap it right in there, basically.
Hold a second.
This is gonna.
I have to, for whatever reason, I have to fix my vimrc. This is gonna drive me insane. Yeah.
Will that work with bashrc? Yes. This is originally a bash script that I had, and it's it does work in Zish as well.
Okay. Great. Sorry.
All right.
Our commitment to the Dracula color theme matters.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Okay, so
I have an optional thing to install it in VS Code when we get into the Rust authoring. Anyway, grab Smart Script.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring that right below your prompt that you just added. We're going to slap that whole thing right in.
Okay.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So we have now two things, and kind of technically a third. We have an alias in there as well. We have smart_script, we have save log, and we have start new log. So go ahead and save this, and then source or exit out of the terminal. I think we could try to just source it for now.
Ooh, that took me back to.
Oh yeah, so I think maybe you should try to get back in ZSH. Yep.
Okay.
So I don't know if because you're kind of two terminals nested here. I'm not sure if this is going to work. We're going to find out in a second. If we go ahead and just try to do any kind of commands that we'd run in Kali, right? Let's say we're doing like ID and, who am I and ipconfig or something like that. It doesn't really matter what these commands are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, IPA, that's fine. Now, if you go to your home directory, there should be a terminal type scripts directory. Okay, let's go ahead and ls or cd into terminal type scripts. Excellent. We have the raw logs of everything that's going on in the terminal now. So, important to note, and yeah, it's dated as well, so you can go into that one. Important to note is that if you try to cat this file, you're catting your own input and output into an infinite loop, right?
Yeah,
so you don't
won't do that.
So try to use tail or head or something that's not going to cat an infinite loop into that. But this is the raw log of everything that you've been doing, right? Yeah, look at that. And look at that. It comes with the colors and everything. Now, exit out of this terminal session.
Okay.
And then let's go back into it, I think, because it just exited out of Zish. So yeah, that should be the thing necessary. If we go back into terminal type scripts. And then back into the raw logs. We should now have a cleaned up. Is it just the raw log?
That's all I see.
I think your double terminal here is being a little wonky.
Oh,
But
okay.
usually when the terminal exits, it flushes like a cleaned up, stripped out all of the kind of colors and everything. It flushes that to the text file. However, what we can do is go ahead and issue the save log command.
Save
Log, all one word.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. Oh, look at that.
And there we go. Saved logs to manual. So we have the ability to we have observability into everything that's running in our terminal TypeScript log file by it's in an automated sense, right? And we can save it to, and yeah, it's going to be kind of
The
kind
text
wonky,
is
right?
like that, but the raw log
The
is
text is kind of, but the raw log is okay.
Nice.
So the idea is this is going to pull. You can collect now with logging like elk and fleet and Kibana. You can collect these for kind of deconfliction purposes or for proving that you weren't on a system that just got hacked or something like that. So yeah, all kind of like building out these utilities that are going to assist us in our responsible endeavors, right? So now let's see. I think that was basically it for the kind of little terminal TypeScripts here. The next thing that we're going to do is install Elastic, right? I don't recommend doing the apt upgrade because that might take a while. So we can start, I think, with just grabbing Docker, and installing it that way. So basically, what we're going to do, and you can do that. I'll just kind of explain.
Yeah.
So from my days as a range engineer, one of my jobs while I was playing the opposing force and doing red team stuff, to make good training, you need to be able to run attacks, but also have telemetry that will pick up those attacks, right? And so I had to get really good at not only being a red teamer, but being somebody who understood defensive stacks. And so I used, back in my range engineer / red team, in the range days, I use things like Elastic and Kibana and FileBeat, and not necessarily Logstash a lot sometimes. I use those to set up the telemetry by which the defenders would be able to see the activities that I have done on the targets, right? And so the idea would be I would put together an attack chain, I would put together a defensive stack, I'd run the attack chain against that defensive stack, and then the defenders would go into the logs and try to find out what I did. So that's a little bit about my background as far as like how I came to understand elk. So the same kind of defensive stack that any defender would use can also benefit the red team by providing observability into our red team infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. Your red team infrastructure is just an extension of your organization's infrastructure, right? The difference is that the defenders are not monitoring it because that wouldn't make any sense. Then they'd know what you were doing.
Yeah.
So you can employ, and there are projects that have done this, and I don't use any of them in this course, but there are some really good ones out there like Red Elk that do all of this for the red team, right? And so I would encourage you to explore those after you do this lab to see which ones might fit your needs better. But this is just a bare bones elk. When I say elk, I think they don't want you to use that term anymore. But
No.
when I'm saying elk, I'm talking about Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana. In this case, it's Elastic Fleet and Kibana, but Effic doesn't really work as well. Or Felt. Don't even worry about it. But that's what we're talking about. We're setting up a log auditing server, basically. And then in the next section of this lab, we're going to set it up so that it uses one of the most powerful monitoring technologies ever created, which is Sysmon. And as of, I think this year, there is a Sysmon for Linux that we use to install on Kali and get really, really good observability into Kali Linux as we're performing our operations.
Now, just a little bit of kind of editor's commentary here.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help it, my inner sysadmin. So if you've ever tried to install Docker on Kali Linux, there is a part, especially now, that is going to catch you out if you're doing like the Ubuntu install instructions from Docker. And we've made the change in the course material here, but I want to call it out specifically for all of you cowgirls and cowboys who think that you know better and could just run through the instructions because you've installed Docker so many times. Okay, so first of all, keep in mind that sudo apt key add has been deprecated. You can't use that thing anymore. Don't do it. Instead, you are manually de-armoring the GPG key and putting it in a specific folder. You could put it wherever you want, but by convention, it's going to be etc apt keyrings and docker.gpg. So that's part 1. Part 2 is you're going to have to echo the deb line here into your new sources file, but make sure that it includes this signed by, right? It has to have that, or it ain't going to work. And also, if you look at the instructions in the Docker instructions, of course, it's going to tell you to use enhance LSB release to get the code name of the Ubuntu release, right? Whether it's Focal or Jammy or whatever it is, right? Well,
Guess where that doesn't exist.
Yeah, Kali doesn't have LSB release.
Linux.
So this ain't going to work. And so instead, you have to lie to... if you want to use the Ubuntu version, which works fine, you can use Debian, I guess, too, but the same problem applies. So either way, you're going to have to lie and say, oh, it's Focal or it's Jammy. And that is what you are adding.
You're not like lying. I mean, this is kind of, these aren't the droids you're looking for, I guess.
You're extremely lying. It's not Ubuntu. If it were, it would have had LSB release.
All right, fair point. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that. That was a little surprising, Kali Linux. I'm not sure what you're going for there. Anyway.
Luckily, there are not enough differences between the two kernels that they ship that it makes a difference. So that is one of the kind of gotchas with that. But once you have that set up, everything apt update works, apt install works. And as you saw, I have sudo docker image ls, so I'm ready to go for the next step.
Excellent. All right. Well, we have forked out the elastic container repository here. In my testing here, you're going to want about 4 gigs of RAM. I put that in as the prerequisite, the required, the minimum required RAM for your Kali Linux machine. I hope that's not going to be like, resource prohibitive for people.
I'm curious. What am I cooking here? I've got, what did I give this? Oh, I'm looking at the whole lab. Sorry. 4 and 8. Okay, four cores, 8 gigs of RAM. You should be fine.
That's going to be perfect. Yeah, so I hope that's not going to be resource prohibitive for people, but your containers will die if you don't have enough RAM. So yeah, just be careful about that. So what we'll do is we'll pull these containers and we'll set them up, and it's a pretty quick setup. I guess, honestly, if you wanted to return to fish now, I mean, we're past the, we have enough terminal logging done in the terminal TypeScripts directory to collect for later, right? So
when
if you
in
wanted
Rome,
to return to fish, it's
when in Rome,
fine.
I'll do it the way the students will do it.
So then, now we're just going to go into that directory, and we have like a startup script, basically. Chmod that to executable if you don't. It's not executable
That's
already.
Another gotcha, right? Again, don't run ahead of the instructions, because if you haven't
don't do Docker compose up.
Exactly. If you haven't used the Docker container project before, it has its own script that manages state, and you definitely want to use it. Now, I'll also mention there's a .env file in here.
Yes, we should have followed the instructions because you have to change the password. I think, does it yell at you if you don't? It might.
It doesn't, annoyingly. But
so Elastic Password changed me. I changed it to RRT on TTI, Responsible Red Teaming on Taggart Institute. Something important to note here, and this goes hand in hand with kind of responsibility. For simplicity's sake, we are running the shouldn't be using that term. We are running the Elastic and Fleet server on the Kali Linux host. I did that. I designed the lab like that to make it simple because I didn't want to have to provide another VM for the student to stand up, and maybe they don't have enough RAM. I just wanted to avoid that completely. We can run Elastic right on the Kali Linux server. You would not do that in real life. I want to and I put this in the notes of the lab. Very clear. You would not do that in real life. Where would this go in real life, Taggart? What do you think?
Oh, this has to be on a fully owned and operated by the red team infrastructure in the house.
Yes.
Not in the cloud.
Not in the cloud. Big caveat, not in the cloud. You will want this on, and this goes for your team servers as well. We talk about this in another section in the course. You want your infrastructure that maintains data about the operations to be on premise in your organization. There's a whole number of reasons we could get into why that's the case. However, my point here is that we're building this over in Kali for simplicity's sake, for the lab's sake, and for to streamline it. And what we want to do in real life is to get a server on your red team infrastructure, hopefully on premise, that's going to maintain this and use TLS to ship these logs to the Elastic server.
So Chad is asking, could it go on a Raspberry Pi that you brought to the site? I would not trust a Raspberry Pi with this job.
Yeah, not even for Chad, not for security reasons or responsibility reasons, but just like horsepower reasons.
Elasticsearch is Java.
Yeah,
okay?
I don't think we can get run on a Raspberry Pi.
You don't want to have to deal. And by the way, if you're gonna be bringing your kit to a site, a reasonably spec'd laptop will do the job.
Decent laptop,
here.
yeah, just a decent laptop, and that's fine. If you're doing an internal and you're plugged into their network, but it never egresses the environment, it never leaves the edge of the network, then that would be absolutely fine. Yeah, I don't see why not. I just think, power wise, horsepower wise, you're not gonna be able to run it on a Raspberry Pi. All right, so let's fire this thing up, shall we?
Indeed. So we're gonna so we've changed the password. We are not, because we're not using this as a defensive tool, we are not enabling the detection rules. Right. So we're gonna leave this all alone. And
that looks good.
chmod plus x. Oh, it's already chmod x'd. Awesome. Looks like
Sure,
I can
then
execute it. So we'll /elasticcontainer.sh start. It has a subcommand. Oh, for the love of God! So I have to run that as. So that's an important gotcha, because actually in the instructions, do you gpassword-a to add the user to the group? You do.
I believe we do.
You do. And then you reboot. Right. So that was the step that I didn't do. So let me. Yep. I want to log out. This will kick me out of the remote session, and I'll go back in. Because. And we do this in PWST too. It's a real bad idea from an operational standpoint. Don't do this in real life. But we do it in the labs all the time. And the reason is it allows you to run Docker commands as your user without having to worry about... All right, let's...
issuing the sudo command. Yep.
Yeah, thank you for finishing my sentence. Okay, and bring up Z shell. So we've got our logging.
And I think now you could probably just ls the terminal.
Oh, there it is.
There you go.
That was weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you could ls the terminal typescripts directory, and there will be, I think, a couple of logs now. So like every time you start a new terminal, it's going to start a new terminal TypeScript log. So if you go into the raw logs, I think there should be a couple now in that one specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yep, you got two now. So
cool.
There you go. It's working. That's great.
That's always a relief, right?
Always a relief. Always a relief when you write the labs like that.
Okay, so let's just make sure that I have Docker. No, but that's because the socket's not. So sudo systemctl start Docker, because I didn't enable it before. Okay, now. Whoa, come on. Did I not add it to the right? It's fine. I'll run.
We can just run sudo. I think
it's
totally fine.
Sudo /elastic container.
In the Kali context, it's you got to be in the directory. In the context of Kali, all these steps check out. So yeah.
Okay.
There we go. That's looking better. All right. So we're pulling in Elastic. We're pulling in Kibana. We're pulling in Fleet. We're pulling in all these containers that are going to stand up our auditing and logging solution. So this just does take a while. So yeah, just as this is going, for the people that are kind of looking at responsible red teaming and saying, yeah, I don't know about the ethics stuff. It seems a little kind of up in the air. I like to do more of the practical stuff. Well, here you go. Read, meditate on the kind of theoretical stuff, but you can come for the theoretical stuff, but you'll stay for the labs, right?
That's right.
That's what, and like I despise training that does not have a practical component. And so I really tried. I brought this thing back and back to the workbench so many times to make sure that there was enough practical skill-based training of interest to keep people coming to the lab and wanting to learn more, right?
I feel confident that this is the only training for cybersecurity that will talk about consequentialism, the ethics of care, deontology, as well as
and payload keying.
That's right, and payload keying. While, by the way, oh hey Husky, the custom malware that you write, what language was that written in?
Yeah, Rust.
Oh yeah.
yes. And that's not just because ooh Rust cool. Look how cool I am for writing it in Rust. Rust's enum system, and we get into this in the course, is so the use case for Rust's enums and payload keying is so it's made. It's not made for it, obviously, but it's such a good use case for payload keying that it was just impossible to turn down.
We figured that out when we were writing Offensive Notion, right? And it was just like, oh, this maps perfectly.
That's where it came
idea.
from. That is where that came from. And thanks to M Alpha for that, because I think M Alpha did the PR for some of the domain keying. I think the domain join keying, right? And then I think you did the rest, right, Taggart? And yeah, then we used enums to actually just say, oh, am I in the context of the domain that I think I'm going to be in? Nope. Okay, don't execute. Yeah, that's responsibility as code is what I like to call it.
All right, so we're waiting for the Elasticsearch container to come up.
This one does take a little bit of time. I've noticed, even on Kali, when you have like 4 gigs of RAM, it still it takes a little time.
Okay, looks like it's healthy. Kibana's coming up next. By the way, so if I'm repeating, and you said this already, like why I do it this way. I have been. For those of you who've been looking at the stream for a while, you know that I have spun up about 1,000 different versions of Elastic, and without any competition, the Elastic Container Project is the easiest way to get up and running.
Absolutely easiest one.
For a SOC or for this use case with Elastic and with Fleet in particular. Now, Fleet is and the Elastic Agent is kind of a newer thing. If you're used to working with Logbeat and with beats,
file beat,
just
the beats in general.
This is a different situation, because what happens is the Elastic Agent is going to go on all your endpoints that you care about, and it's going to govern all of your log collection. So it's not like you deploy a beat per collection source. You are configuring the agent to grab everything at once. So it's a lot more like how Waza works.
Yep.
And the downside is you're limited sort of to the way that Elastic Agent configuration is available to you in the interface. But the upside is that it is, for all the stuff that you can do with it, so much easier.
It's way more streamlined. Yeah, you're pulling in all the different threads when you do it that way. Cool. We should be done here in like a beat. This is the last stage of the build here. And then we are ready to go into Kibana. Yep, the fleet server comes up.
Yep.
And yeah, so I guess the other part of this is that we expand this with Sysmom for Linux, but the fleet Elastic Kibana setup can be expanded into any number of directions, right? Suricata, Zeek, right?
Yeah.
IDS and protocol parsing.
And
other
should be,
kinds
probably.
Of,
You want one network telemetry in a real
yes,
version.
I would. You absolutely want network telemetry in your network. So there's just so many different ways that you can configure your red team infrastructure to get better data out of it, right? So yeah, use this as a base, but let your imagination run wild and start to think about, well, if I was in a robust, mature defensive environment, what would that look like, right? Cool. I think we are good to go. It might take a minute, but you're going to go to localhost 5601. And you should be able to get to Kibana, although it might say Kibana server not ready yet.
This
we
is
can just
unsafe.
Love that.
It's so good. For those of you who don't know, whenever you get to that SSL error page, there's a cheat code in Chromium-based browsers where instead of hitting the advanced and proceed, which you can do, but like a noob, you can type like a cheat code. Just type "this is unsafe," literally, and it will bypass that screen and take you right to it. And that works, by the way, for both SSL and HSTS errors. And that's cool because the HSTS errors don't have an advanced and proceed, but you can still bypass them. Okay, so we're logging in.
Yes, we Elastic and your password.
Elastic, RRT on TTI.
And we should have the Kibana dashboard here.
Oh, yeah.
The absolute first thing that you must do before you do anything else is go into stack management and advanced settings. And, find me the person who doesn't do this by default. I want to have a word with them. I guess, is Elastic open source? I think I could just do a PR. Dark mode. Reload. There we go. And then roll at the page. Oh, much better. So now we need to set up our logging solution to both have our Kali box enrolled on it and also set up the policy so that it pulls in the logs.
Precisely.
So what we're going to do, I actually need I don't quite know the steps of this one offhand.
This one I have committed to memory, but we will go through. We're in
sure.
So down here. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to the fleet server is running, but we need to change it first before we install the Elastic agent on our local machine in order to speak to fleet. The reason we need to do that is because, and I don't know why this is true, the fleet server's output is configured incorrectly by default. So we have to change that first. Oh, we're all the way down.
Yeah, we're down a little bit above where you are.
Yep. So we're going to go to fleet and nope, still not there.
No, that's it. Yeah. So yeah, we're here. So we go fleet and add agent, and then we enroll the agent in the. I think we do that configuration after we enroll the agent. Right?
Yeah. Either order works. So if you have agents here, you can see that the fleet server, which is in the Docker container, that's good, right? You're solid there. Now, if we go to add agent, agent policy, we actually want to create a new policy.
Yep. Create that agent policy. 1 is fine for the name. We go down to number 3 when it kind of catches up here in a second, and it's going to give us like this one-liner, right? This one-liner is almost like a download and execute cradle, which is really funny. It's like it kind of looks like that, but it won't run,
and it's wrong.
It's so strange. It will not run unless we add something to the end of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to run this one piece at a time so you can see what's going on. The first thing we're doing is we're downloading the Elastic agent directly from Elastic. Okay? All 377 megabytes of it. I'd like to thank my ISP for being beefy enough to do this live. And once that's down, we will tar it, or untar it, I should say.
There we go. Look at all these beats: metric beat, file beat, heartbeat, even
OS query, which I haven't played with yet, but is really cool that it's in there.
Yeah.
All right. Wrong place. Elastic agent. Yep. Okay.
Yep, there we go.
And then this is the part that we need to change.
So, again, you note that the URL here will be your Elastic server. But for this, it doesn't necessarily need to be that IP address. We can do localhost on this because this is running locally on a container. Again, I caveat, this would not happen in real life. You would want to keep this on a dedicated server somewhere else. But for our context, the IP or the localhost will work there. But the last thing that we need to do is just throw a -i in here. You can maybe enlighten me on what the -i is. you explained that it fixed it, and I wasn't totally sure.
It's so the problem, of course, is that, or not problem, but the situation here is that this thing is communicating correctly, thank goodness, over HTTPS, over
HTTPS, yes.
TLS, right?
Yes.
But with a self-signed cert. And so
Right. Yep.
the Elastic Agent installation will, without the -I, which is an insecure option flag, without that will correctly throw an error saying, hey, I don't trust this cert. What are you doing?
Right.
But with the -I,
so,
it doesn't care.
Yeah. Okay. And then the important thing to note here is that if you are shipping your logs from your Kali team server out to a remote location, it absolutely must be encrypted. And this goes hand in hand with everything else that's taught in the course, right? Failed to enroll.
No, that
let's
might
see.
be. Hold on a second. I think I was missing a space.
That looks
better.
Better? Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you go back over to Kibana, you should see agent enroll confirmed. Good. Now I think we start to configure our like policies and the things that we're actually going to set up for this agent.
Not quite yet.
Oh, not yet? Yep.
No, because so this is the part that both IPSec and I found you have to fix. Right? So the problem is, so that TLS problem of not honoring the cert goes both ways.
I forgot about this. Yep. Okay.
So
yeah, we're going to just tell it to not worry about SSL verification.
This
this
part right here won't work. It won't it won't confirm incoming data because there's no data coming in, because it can't yet.
Right.
Even though
So,
it
yeah,
says
we just-
healthy.
Yep. We'll just go into settings here. We pick up our the outputs here, I believe.
Yes.
We add one. We are calling this I think like fleet policy or something like that. I don't quite remember.
It doesn't really matter. But the point is that, and this is crucial, it can be localhost in this case, but otherwise it would be the IP address, right, of your server. So in this case, it was what, 1.53? Yes.
I would check that, but yeah, that.
No, that's
okay.
right. How do I know? Because it's right here.
Nice. And then advanced YAML configuration, we add a
8220.
single. Yep, the port. Yep, for fleet, and then we add a single YAML configuration here for SSL dot verification. Yeah, is none.
Can you tell that I've done this a few times?
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and then
SSL
check those two.
Right. SSL verification mode none, because again, it's both ways. We need to. It's not just the server cert that we need to not trust, or that we need to not care about the trust. We need to not care about the verification on the client side. And so we do that with this config line, and then we make this the default for agent integrations and agent monitoring.
Save and apply.
This, by the way, this change is not possible when you do it outside the Elastic Container project. I don't know why that's true, but you have to go into the text file on the server config to make that change. This is one of the reasons why the Elastic Container project is the way to go here.
Yep. So I think now we are going into, let me see the lab steps.
No. All right.
And then, yep, SSL verification mode are good. Yeah, the last thing we actually need to do is just pick up the logs, right?
Yes.
So the by default, the fleet server and / agents are not going to know which logs we're interested in. This could be literally anything. You could throw in the different like authorization or authentication logs if you want, SSL authentications, anything in var log if you want. But for us, we have our terminal typescripts directories, right? So why don't we just go ahead and add those and check them out?
So this
integration.
this is how the Elastic Agent, as opposed to FileBeat, works, right? You add integrations and you kind of go shopping.
Yep, and it like pulls. It says, okay, go find me this one and pull it over to the server. So custom log.
And just custom
there
logs
it is.
right here.
Custom logs. Yep, and we're gonna have again. This could be anything you want. You could do anything in var log or anything like that. But we have 2 custom logs that we care about. Add custom logs, and we're gonna add 2 line items here.
We go to advanced option, or no, log file path, right?
Log file path. The first one is terminal type scripts, everything in everything that's called raw log, right?
Yep.
And then the other one is terminal type scripts manual.
Okay. Right. So where am I? I'm here, and not Callie because my username is different.
Right. Yep. Just fits your username if it's different.
And the
And the same thing there, but then that is manual.
And yes, this does honor globs. So we can put wildcards in here. That'll work fine. Looks good.
Yep, looks good over there. Save and continue.
I'm going to call this raw log just because I want to give it a real name.
Okay.
And save and continue.
And this is pulling in our terminal TypeScript's raw logs, having them rolled up by the fleet agents, and then shipping them over to the fleet server, which is then visible in Kibana. For those who haven't used Kibana, it's a pretty popular data visualization tool. It doesn't necessarily need to be a defensive tool. A lot of people use it for just, I put the whole works of William Shakespeare JSONified into Kibana once and did text sentiment analysis on it. Right? Like you can use it for.
That's amazing.
Oh no, that's a great story. I should tell you that sometime. That was my quarantine project after I came back from the trail. So now if we're in the logs index, right, and we should have the ability to go back 15 minutes or so, I guess. Maybe it just needs a second to catch up.
Where is my date thingy?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. Usually that it has the date thing there. If you click immediately to the left of refresh there, does it pop up the? No, it doesn't.
Hold on, let me go to metrics and flip it back. All right, let's go over.
This is a new one. I have not.
This has happened. This has happened to me plenty of times.
Oh, okay.
So let's see. Cyclop Cali.
Last activity 39 seconds ago, though, so that's actually fine. Looks good.
Yeah. I just don't think it's sent yet. GPS 82. Hold on a second.
This is the great mystery, everyone.
Well, there's only one or two things that could have gone wrong. So let's see.
Yeah.
In the output, that's the problem. It's on the wrong port.
Oh, okay.
So we'll change that to 9200. That was my mistake. I was thinking 8220
so
for
the Elastic API. Okay. The Elastic API lives at 9200.
Yeah.
All right. Save and deploy. See if we pick them up this time. Okay.
Let's go over to agents and make sure they don't say updating. It says healthy. Last activity 20 seconds ago. Give me stuff.
And Elastic Discover or Kibana Discover.
Hey!
Last 15 minutes. There we go. Okay. Now, one of the best ways that I found, because this can be a lot of information, one of the best ways is the field names. Yep, you got it. What you want to do is not integrations, but do log path. So just path should pick it up.
Oh, log path.
File path. And if we have terminal TypeScripts in here,
Indeed
and
we do.
look at that, we can click the little plus sign and we can filter across that field.
Oh, so
all
good.
of the logs that have to do that. Now, again, this is kind of illustrative. Maybe the logs here are going to give you what you need, maybe not. But I think the point of this here, and yeah, if you have the raw logs, they're going to have this kind of terminal cleanup stuff. One of the things in that script is to pull in the logs that have that kind of cleaned up, so you don't see all the color codes and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's something up with your terminal that's not working for some reason, but in the normal Kali, it's totally fine. But yeah, this is think about where you could apply this for observability in your infrastructure, right? And so your terminal is one example of that, but there are other places that you can go. Good gravy, the color coding there.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. But if you have the manual logs, if you go back over to log file path, and you should have picked up something in the manual logs,
This is
right?
the manual stuff.
Oh, that is the
interestingly.
manual stuff. Okay. Well, it's kind of coming through there. I mean, you can kind of see it.
I think basically mine nested. The problem was that my default was fish.
Your default, your nested terminal here is, I think, kind of throwing a wrench in the ordeal.
And potentially
but usually-
Tmux as well.
Yeah, but usually that's going to just be the flat output of the terminal, right? So that's like part one. Now let's kick this up into high gear.
Yes.
And let's bring out the big guns, the big observability guns. Right?
All right.
So
well, I've
we've
completed
done
this.
Yeah, we've done our cute little terminal TypeScript thing. Okay, that's awesome. But like, if we want some real firepower when it comes to observability, we're gonna break out Sysmon for Linux.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, let's do it. Let's install Sysmon for Linux. All the installation steps are right there.
So this is a whole thing, right? So Sysmon for Linux, if you've never installed something for Linux from Microsoft, it's just an adventure, I'll tell you. Would you be okay if I reverted to fish in case there's any weirdness?
Oh yeah, we can get out of the terminal now.
Thanks,
this
bud.
is all gonna be the Sysmon utility being pulled in by Fleet now.
Right.
So yeah, we don't have to worry about the terminal now.
So every time I do that, I'll put in the command and then think I just have the URL on the clipboard. Okay,
Cannot resolve wget.
So all right, that worked. If we have packages, right? Now, the way that Microsoft does this is a little bit funky. What happens is basically this Debian file, we're going to install it, but all it does is the stuff that we just did manually for Docker with the GPG key and the source. So that's all this thing does. It doesn't install anything but source files. So if we sudo dpkg dpackage chopra, packages microsoft.prod.deb, this installs, and if we ls etc apt sources.list.d, hey, look, a Microsoft prod.list.
Nice.
So if we sudo apt update and sudo apt install -y, this part matters a whole bunch.
I was like looking at the and I'm like, are you feeling okay, man? And then I'm like, fish. Yeah,
That's
got
right. Sysmon for Linux. Now, this part is not
yes.
optional. You
Yes, this
must
is
also
important.
install.
Yeah.
So Sysmon for Linux, the way that it works is it uses my favorite technology in the whole wide world, eBPF. And in order for it to work on Kali Linux out of the box, you have to install the libbpf cc library in order for it to have the kernel hooks, basically, that it requires to run. So that looks good.
And then I don't know if that requires a reboot or not.
No, it doesn't.
Maybe just a log out. Yeah.
I don't think it even requires that.
Okay.
That's
Well,
the
we might be
beauty
okay
of
then.
dynamic kernel.
Yep. Oh yeah, good point.
DKMS, baby. It's not 1996 anymore.
Yep. So yeah, we're tapping into kernel space here to get you the most observability into what's going on the Linux file system and the activities that are happening as well.
It's honestly like one of the most uncomfortable parts of eBPF programming is that everything you're doing is root. It's like this isn't safe. Okay, so we have Sysmon for Linux, but we're gonna also need the config file. Now, Sysmon for Linux uses the same config file format that Sysmon for Windows does. It uses an XML, but it doesn't have all the same event IDs that Sysmon for Windows does. If you think about that for like half a second, it makes total sense. Named pipes aren't a thing. Also, the registry isn't a thing. So there's only a subset of IDs that it supports. So luckily, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, or Mystic, has a very nice starter XML with just a collect them all starter file. So we're going to use that every time. Why can't I stop doing that?
Got him.
Okay, so
All right, we got our XML. Good.
I just want to show you what it looks like real quick. Okay, so this is what it looks like to collect them all, where 1, 3, 5, 9, 10, 11, 23. Those are the event IDs that Sysmon for Linux currently supports. Yeah. So it's not everything, but honestly, 1, 3, and
3 is the one that I think a lot of people will be most interested in, right?
I mean, also because it's Linux 11 is going to be a huge deal, right?
Oh,
so
for sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we test this with by looking at 3 and making sure we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, let's go ahead and grab the Sysmon start up the Sysmon service. And,
now this is very much like installing it on Windows, right? But the difference is we've installed the program to like actually where even is it? Which Sysmon? It's in user local bin or user bin. Okay,
user bin.
So all this thing is going to do is it's so accept EULA as per usual, but
Microsoft
the -I right is going to install it as a systemd service. All right, so it's going to create the unit file and do all that stuff, and then use this XML as its initial config.
Okay.
All right.
Do.
I am changing the song because I am worried this is going to get DMCA'd. Okay. Configuration
let's
file
take a look
validated.
at our error code.
So
Job Sysmon service failed without. Yeah, let's just look at the journal CTL, see if something went up. Configuration could not be loaded. Are you in the directory? Did you point it at the right file? Yeah, you're in RT, right? So
//
there you go.
But it said configuration file validated before.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't get this far though. Yeah, that I think I hit that when I was doing the QA for this lab because I just didn't point it at the right directory.
Well,
but that looks better.
You might want to change that up.
Well, no, not not fish. Like that is fine if you're not in the fish terminal. Yeah. So
fish, you betrayed me.
Yeah, that's fine in the But yeah, that's
to
okay.
systemctl status Sysmon. What you got for me? Active and running. Awesome.
Running. Good.
And
cool. Now Sysmon is like on the system. It is installed and it's like looking around. And it's like, all right, show me what you got.
And it is mutating our syslog like you wouldn't believe. Look at this XML directly in syslog.
Syslog, one of the native logging utilities on the Linux file system, now has information that Sysmon is, generating, right? And so this is going to be really, really powerful. But it's all over the place. If you had to look through it like this, I mean, get ready with, awk and grep and stuff. But we don't have to do that because we already set up our Elastic server and Fleet. And so all we need to do is get this thing into Fleet and then parse it, right? So let's do just that. Let's go ahead and set up an ingester.
I'm looking for the link to the ingest pipeline.
That's it right there, ingest pipeline.
It's
stack management.
No, I mean the link to my gist. We're not there yet.
It's not. Okay, we're not quite there yet. It's up at the top in the tools, but yeah, we're not. Got it. It's there in the instructions. So ingest pipeline.
Stack.
And this was when I got to this part, I was like, oh, I've done this like a million times. Wrangling ingest pipelines into Kibana to get telemetry up. New pipeline, Sysmon for Linux is the name.
Okay.
And we're going to add a processor.
We're going to
import processor. Yes, pardon. So now we grab your lovely raw syslog parser. And we grab this whole dang thing.
Here's what's up with this. If you are using Logbeat, you can use something called the WinXML, like WinEvent XML processor to process XML out of syslog. You could just do that because it's there. For reasons surpassing understanding, that processor is not available to the Elastic agent. And so in order to parse the XML out of the syslog to get proper Sysmon event data, I wrote this, which does the exact same thing, but it does it in Elastic agent style.
Absolutely magnificent piece of work right here. Just
Thanks,
even
bud.
just glancing over it, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'd never want to even touch this with a 10-foot pole.
It was mainly just tedious, but anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so, but it exists now and it never has to exist again.
Yep.
Now,
So we'll put that right into our ingest pipeline.
copy pasta. Now, this is, you don't paste it in between, you just put it right
The
there
whole thing.
instead.
Yep. The instructions make sure you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Load and overwrite.
Mm-hmm.
All right, looking pretty good. We've got our dissections of all of the different event IDs.
Yep.
I think we can go ahead and save. There's no failure processor for this one, so
No.
we're going to go ahead and create the pipeline.
That's
then-
right. Create pipeline.
And then we go over, excuse me. Excuse me. We're back. We go over to the syslog, not the sysmon one that we just made, but the syslog ingest pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to basically just throw that right in there and say, hey, if you see these patterns in syslog, go ahead and parse them as if they were sysmon data. So like we are, yeah, good.
This is
pointing that out.
gonna freak you out. But
yeah.
think about what we're doing here. We're letting Elastic do everything it wants to do with the syslog stuff, and we're just saying, before you're done.
Yep. So yeah, add processor. We're gonna grab the pipeline processor type, the one that we just made. So you can
add a whole other pipeline as a processor step.
Yes. Pipeline name sysmon for Linux.
Right. Lowercase. And ignore failure.
I think that might be obvious. Sure, fine, sounds good. And go ahead and add that pipeline. Now, for those of you watching right now that are like, what the hell are they talking about? We're hopefully about to illustrate why we just went through the whole rigmarole of setting this up. So if we save this pipeline.
Yeah, this is the most blue teamy sysadmin stuff a red teamer may ever do.
Hey, aspiring red teamers, you don't get out of this stuff. I'm telling you right now, if you want to be a proficient red teamer, you do not ever get to escape the defensive log collection, log aggregation work, all right? So let me show you why what we just did was so important. If we go back to Kibana Discover, and we grab, hopefully it has already rolled in, right? Yeah, if you curl any old thing, right? Lovely. I love it.
Always be branding.
Let's go ahead and drop the log file path of the terminal TypeScripts. That's
look how many more events we're getting now.
Oh my goodness, look at all these events and look at how they've got these, like, in the message field here, which we're sorted on. Look at how we've got all of this this XML in here, right? So why don't we go ahead and filter on the event ID? So go ahead and back over in the filter field names search bar, event.id.
Which we have now.
Yep, and if we open this up, if we click, not the plus, but if we open this up, we should have all of the sysmon event IDs. Oh, okay. That might be like a timing issue, so let's go ahead and just filter for event ID equals like 3 or something like that.
Yeah, it's there.
Event ID 3, ladies and gentlemen, is a sysmon event ID for an outbound or really any type of network connection, right? So we've picked up now our sysmon has told us what processes are starting which connections, right? And so I'm looking at Taggart's process name, event image right there is Brave. So Brave browser has gone to, and maybe if we go through a little bit more, we can see, the port, the protocol, and then I think on the next, we get source IP, we get destination IP, and this might just be Brave being noisy, but what about that curl to Taggart Tech that we just did? I bet we can find that now that we're sorting on sysmon. So if we, let's think of what's a good way to find this one. Either destination or source IP. We might be able to. Event image, user bin curl. Let's open that one up right there. That is to 9200. So that's going to be to your Elastic Stack. But if we search for event dest port equals 443, perhaps.
You got something for me now?
I'm thinking like a
there we go.
like a blue teamer, right? So we're pivoting now. So
Hey,
maybe
there it
one of
is.
these curls, is now our curl out to Taggart Tech. But let's do something even more illustrative. Let's go ahead and fire up MSF console,
Oh my god.
and we do this in the lab.
Yeah.
If we fire up MSF console, and we start a web delivery payload. And this is just the simplest way to spawn Meterpreter on your just point and click, run a command and spawn Meterpreter. We're going to fire up a web delivery payload and just have it be a Python payload, and then just run that on our local host and see if we can track it down in Sysmon, right? So this can be analogous to like if we've ever suspected that our infrastructure has been compromised, what could we do to try to track it down? Well, we're looking at the telemetry right now that's going to find us exactly what happened, right? So that's that's the part of the lab right there.
Mm-hmm.
So if we sort on things like event source IP equals 127001, event source destination port equals 4444, which is the default for Meterpreter, we can find that kind of thing when that happens in our environment, right? You can extrapolate this out. You can do this to find botnet bots that have made it onto your environment, right? Any number of kind of auditing defensive threat hunting that you want to do for your red teaming environment, you can now do with Sysmon for Linux. And now that it's in Kibana, and you can sort and filter on each of those things. And I think you should be able to just run that. You get the Python. That's your Python payload right there. You see that Python C import sys under that. You can do that one right there, because that will get you not only the outbound connection to 4444, but then you can tie that back to a process, Python, right?
Right.
So if you do that, you should get a Meterpreter shell open back over there. Yep. And now if we go back to Kibana,
It's been so long since I've run Meterpreter.
if you sort by desport equals 4444, you should now have the observability into what just happened on your endpoint. So if you just change that to 4444.
Thank you.
And this is kind of working in Kibana. It takes a little bit getting used to, but it's really powerful once you understand the filters are really like where all the power is, right? Oh, look at that. We've got Python and Ruby opening on 4444. And
so can I do a little blue teamy threat hunt?
Yeah,
real quick?
do so. Let's threat hunt, man.
Thanks,
Let's
bud. Okay, so we have this Python 3, right? We have this desport that shows us whatever. Now, event ID 3 has some data, but not all. But the thing that it has that I want badly is the PID, right?
The PID.
So
if you have a PID when you're threat hunting,
that's right. So I'm gonna filter.
What you go for.
I'm gonna filter for this value. And then
now be careful. This is kind of like it's lucky that we're all in the same index here, but be careful about when you filter on things and off of things, right? If you filter for a PID but keep your source IP in there, maybe you will get some hits, but maybe not, right?
And PIDs also are ephemeral, right? So even like if you have even a single endpoint's logs that persist throughout even a couple of hours, right? PIDs can get reused, so you got to be aware of that. But in this particular case, we have what I really want now is I want event ID 1. Give me everything for process creation, and then I'm gonna add a column,
and then
which is the event
what
command
do we
line.
have for the event command line? Look at
Got him.
Oh, beautiful. You got him. You've drawn a bead on the adversary that compromised your environment at that point, right? So yeah, there you go. And from that, you can extrapolate, what the process did, where it went, C2 for that matter. That's all in defense of your red team infrastructure, right? That's something that people don't really think about a lot, I think. So that is Sysmon for Linux wrapped up into Kibana and Fleet, with a little bit of terminal logging, all for the purpose of red team logging and auditing your infrastructure.
Phenomenal.
So that's the lab. I mean, I hope everybody enjoyed that, got something out of that. Maybe they're excited about taking it now. I guess the last thing that we could talk about is the capstone real quick.
Yeah, let's talk about that capstone, because John Hammond did a whole video on it.
Yeah. So that, and like I had such a blast working with John on that, and it's just, it still blows my mind that John was like, I love this idea. I think this is so cool. Let's do a video on it. So I'm like forever thankful for him doing that. So I hope it lives up to people's expectations. But here's the general gist of the capstone. So you've gone through the course. You now have maybe a general idea of how to conduct yourself responsibly as a red teamer. We're going to put you into a simulated red team engagement. We're going to give you rules of engagement scoping document. It might be sufficient. It might not. We're going to tell you have this amount of time. We're going to give you a vulnerable VM that you kind of in the background for the sake of kind of the gameplay, you set up and you give it an IP address.
Yep.
But we're going to pretend for all intent and purpose that is a target that's out in the DMZ somewhere of a corporation that you are performing a red team engagement on, right?
So
and then you... Yep.
I was just going to say,
ahead.
What's just from a structural standpoint, the capstone is really interesting because it's two things. It is the choose your own adventure thing that we're going to play, or you can see, but it's not just that. There is a technical part. There's a whole VM that you got to spin up and like...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is, and that's why I call it the choose your own pwn adventure, right? Because it is a branching storyline where you're going to have to pick the thing to do, just like a choose your own adventure book, like, you know, that you used to read when you were younger. But there is a live VM in front of you that is, for gameplay purposes, treated like it's a DMZ host that you found. But, you know, you're tasked with compromising that host. But it's not that simple. It's not a try hack me room. It's not just a hack the box machine, right? You're actually in the context of a red team engagement. And so things that you do, if you haven't paid attention to your scoping document, if you haven't clarified things, if you haven't asked the right questions, things that you can do can get you game over. And what does game over look like in this case? It looks like the trusted agent calling you up and saying, hey, excuse me, we told you that was supposed to be out of scope. You know, we're going to have to, you know, talk about your future on the for our clients, right? So this is the crux of the capstone, is that you're going to be put into what I would consider to be responsibly and ethically ambiguous situations in a branching storyline, and you have to decide what to do. And some of those decisions might land you in a game over state. Just like in real life, some of those decisions might land you in a position where you now have to explain something to your client that you probably don't want to explain. And I understand it's a game. It's a capstone of a course. I could never fully represent the true like dynamic branching storyline of a real red team engagement, but I'm hoping that people will take this and kind of exit out of this thinking like, wow, like my choices really do matter, right? I'm not playing a CTF anymore. I'm not playing a try hack me room anymore. Like, this is real. My client's data is real. How I treat them, their staff, and their assets has real world consequences. So maybe you do want to examine what it's like to fail, you know? Maybe you do want to see like, okay, like, you know, it might be fun to say, all right, I'm going to act irresponsibly here, what happens? And then you get a game over. It's a safe environment for you to do that, right?
Yeah.
There's no way that I can like capture this whole thing. You're not going to know how it feels until you're actually out on a red team engagement. But, you know, every moment that you're out on a red team engagement is a branching storyline, and you get to decide where that story goes.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit. I want to zoom out a little bit as we come to the end of the stream tonight. So responsible red teaming is the first course that we're putting out on the Taggart Institute after something kind of amazing has happened, where
of course
we've kind of taken the next step here, where Husky and I have co-founded the Taggart Institute LLC. We are actual co-founders of now like a school. And that's the way that we're treating this. This is a school. You come to this group to learn, and you are going to be supported the whole way through. That is what we're doing, and because it's a school, I want to talk a little bit about what the Choose Your Own Adventure is an instance of, but something that every course that we are putting out is going to involve.
Right.
So,
yes.
Every course, if I go to TaggartInstitute.org, we have other courses, by the way, all of which are free right now. There will be pricing conversations about some courses. None of them are ever going to cost more than $20, which is the most they can possibly cost. But those are mainly
we're all in agreement here. The founders, so Taggart and I, and the instructors, we're all in agreement that like cost and pricing is to be thing to keep us alive. It is not the end state. There's no like scaling growth that's going to be going on
that's
here.
Not what we're
small and focused and trying to get the best possible education going, which in a way benefits from being this small and not really worrying about scaling, right?
The metaphor I've been using is that we want to be kind of the small liberal arts college of technology and security. No, specifically not a state school. Like, I don't want to be Penn State. No, but I want to be.
I'm thinking of like the Massachusetts state schools that are all kind of like. I mean, they're smaller, but I guess there's like UMass and stuff. But
despite
small little educational institutions.
The fact that this works, even though you're from Massachusetts and I'm from Pennsylvania, is probably the biggest miracle of all of this. But nevertheless, so what I want to talk about is the fact that all of these courses have what's called an exhibition of mastery at the end. And this is a term that I pulled from an ed theorist that did a lot to influence me, named Ted Sizer. And an exhibition of mastery is not a final exam. It's not just that. Because a final exam, you can study some facts, you can memorize some stuff, you can take the test, and you can pass. Right? That's not what that is. An exhibition of mastery is holistic. It is, you have to demonstrate mostly to yourself that you have grasped the material that you set out to understand. And that's kind of what we do. Look, we're going to be real with you. We cannot automate exhibitions of mastery. We can't do it. And also we can't grade everybody's papers, So here's the deal. We understand that in this journey, you are self-guided learners. To a degree, you have support in a lot of ways from us, from the course developers, and from the community on the Discord. But the exhibition of mastery is not for us, it's for you. And so the idea is you go through the course and then you perform the exhibition of mastery for yourself. And that requires some discipline on your part, because you don't have to turn it in. We encourage you to share your success, but we don't make you turn it in. Grades aren't mastery, you know what I mean? So that is one of the kind of core philosophy of education that we're building on to make all of these courses. And so I wanted to just call out that the Choose Your Own Adventure here it's amazing. It's in depth, but
it forced me to really think about how I was I had to figure out how I was going to pull off the exhibition of mastery, right? Mm-hmm. That was a big challenge for me. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, red team operations are choose your own adventures, right? So like in a way, so it just fit really well, right? But it took a while for me to be like, well, I mean, what is the final kind of entity here going to look like? So it was challenging. For somebody who's done a lot of training and built a lot of assessment modules and things to, prove that people have done a thing or, check the box or something, like this was a lot different. It felt a lot different to put this together, and it was really fun, and I had a blast doing it.
We're after something bigger than certifications. And this is kind of where I want to wrap it. We're after something bigger than certifications. Certifications are fine. They're great for professional success. But one of the things you're going to find for every single course that we put out, and I don't think any course more than RRT, I think RRT exemplifies this maximally. We are trying to build a new kind of hacker, basically. We're trying to build somebody who is infinitely curious, but also empathetic, kind, and ethical.
Ethically sound.
Yeah.
Of high caliber of moral fiber, I would say. And this is our first attempt to do that. It's a conversation I want to see more in the field. It's a conversation I want to see imbued into the people who want to become red teamers. And I think everybody from different disciplines can kind of think about what responsible red teaming means to them, right? And yeah, that's a good way to summarize it. Great hackers are good people, right? You know, we need to come out of the dark as a community, and draw lines in the sand over the things that we will do and we will not do. And I think that starts with asking ourselves about, once legality is sorted, what do we think about our ethical frameworks? Once our ethical frameworks are kind of agreed upon and pondered, how do we carry ourselves responsibly? I think that goes far beyond red teaming. I think that's in vulnerability research. That's in, you know, defensive work, threat intel. It's a conversation that I think echoes. It can go different places, right? So, again, I don't know. I mean, this is my take at starting it. I don't know if it will resonate, but if it does, you know, I'm hoping people can walk away with something. And that's what I want to see in the community. That's the kind of community, the training I would have wanted, the community I would have wanted to come up in. That's what we're trying to build today. So,
well, I'm supremely confident that it will resonate. Not just as as your partner in the business, but as somebody who has gone through the course from its inception to its final form. I don't think there's anything quite like it. I think that it's something that was desperately needed, and I'm so glad that it exists now and that we've shared it with the community.
I really appreciate that. I think we might let's leave it here. I'm gonna hit update and just see if we've crossed 1,000 people.
Oh, here we go.
For this. So 3, 2, 1.
Did we break the site?
Hold on. Well, no, I went to the wrong thing. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, we have crossed 1,000 enrollments
in one day.
In less than 24 hours. We are now at 1040. 1,040 people have signed up for this course. I am absolutely flabbergasted, and now I get to just go to bed and wake up tomorrow and, you know, try to sort out how thankful I am for this community and all my thoughts about it. So
that's phenomenal. All right. Well,
wow.
I want to thank all of our friends who are joining us on the stream for being here to share the kind of the launch celebration with us. Obviously, we're really excited about what's going on here, and we hope that you are too. This is just the beginning. There's a whole lot more to come. Go check us out at taggartinstitute.org. Go get responsible red teaming. Put that on at the top of your course to-do list, especially if you're an offensive operator. I don't think there's anything more important that you could possibly find to do.
It's a pretty quick one too. It's not too involved. It won't take you very long.
Yep. So with that, we're gonna call it a night. I'll be back on Wednesday night, doing some more Cody type stuff. But until then, friends, as always, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking. We'll see you next time.